First of all, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today in this much-needed conversation on psychologists standing in solidarity with Palestinian people's struggle. My name is Francesca Esposito, and I'm one of the organizers of today's webinar, alongside other members of the ECPA team. ECPA is European Community Psychology Association. We have here Armagan Chamkanai, Francesca De Falco, Marik Martin Lorusso, Frash Sandungu, Megan Vine, and Miles Thompson. This webinar is the first of a series of solidarity conversations which aim to address the complicity of establishment psychology in the genocide and scholasticide underway in Palestine. And we also wish to celebrate the courageous resistance of the Palestinian people, their full humanity and complex personhood, as well as to share different experiences of psychologists who are standing in solidarity with their struggles for freedom, justice, and liberation from settler colonial violence, claiming truth to power during the genocide. As the Israeli historian and political scientist Urmitapa emphasized in a seminar last week in Venice, morally immunity is important for the Jewish community in Israel and around the globe. And this is why there has been a desperate attempt to control academic knowledge production and media narratives by Israeli lobbyists and establishment powers. And this is also why governments and institutions around the globe, including academic and professional ones, have been so resistant to acknowledge what is happening in Gaza, a genocide unfolding right before our eyes. In the field of psychology, major psychology organizations have refused to endorse statements about ceasing fire, silencing voices that are speaking truth to power. Even worse, some major psychology organizations have not acknowledged that a genocide is happening in the first place. Has popular disgust and outrage intensified over Israel's genocidal actions, psychology organizations that are keen to avoid criticism have moved in the opposite direction, normalizing this abnormal reality and continuing their business as usual, as if nothing is happening, even in the face of important pronunciations, such as recent pronunciation from International Court of Justice, amongst others. These reactions have made evident the colonial nature of establishment mainstream psychology and its complicity in upholding and legitimizing conditions of genocide in Palestine as well as in other global contexts. They also make clear the role of Western academia and establishment psychology in whitewashing the current genocide and its historical origin. And while it is important to play an active role in stopping people's suffering, at the same time, as Urmitapa also emphasized, it is crucial to concentrate our efforts on challenging hegemonic narratives and versions of histories and affirming the right analysis. With all means at our disposal, we need to struggle to affirm a narrative that places the current genocide as the inevitable outcome of Israel's settler colonial project, a narrative that challenges the discourse of Zionism as a democratic liberal ideology and the Zionist project in Palestine. So we think of this series of conversations as a place to amplify this right analysis, as well as a place to breathe and think together about solidarity, resistance, decolonization, as well as their limits. Importantly, we envision this space as one of empathy. Bearing that in mind, we want to ensure this space is open for all while maintaining a dialogical approach to discussions where inflammatory or hate speech of any kind will not be tolerated. That is why, to guide our conversation, we have decided to use a community agreement created by Palestine Solidarity at UMass Lowell, which was kindly shared by one of our speakers. It was included in the presentation and description of the event, but we will also share it in the chat so you can read it at your own pace. So one ECPA member will share it in the Q&A space, Q&A chat. So now, without any further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers. I'm deeply grateful and honored to share this space with them. And I'm I really want to thank them for their generosity, for being with us today and sharing their insights, struggles, experiences, and interconnected vulnerabilities. After a round of conversation, we will open to the Q&A. Please feel free to include your questions in the Q&A chat throughout the session. Someone from the team will collect them. The webinar is also registered in order to make it then available on our platforms. Someone will share with you the link to the ECPA website where we will make it available. We also have a YouTube channel. We will also upload it there. You are all invited also to sign up, register for our newsletter if you want to be informed of future conversations and overall of our initiatives. If any of you don't want to be recorded, also please feel to turn off your cameras and to choose the way you engage with this format and with this event. So now I'll start to introduce our speakers that I'm very honored to have here with us. I will start with Dr. Samah Jabr. Dr. Jabr is a Palestinian psychotherapist, psychiatrist, and writer. Since 2016, she has been chair of the mental health unit at the Palestinian Ministry of Health. In her books, Beyond the Fronts and Sumud, she provides a decolonial view of the mental health, individual and collective, of the Palestinian people within a system of colonial violence such as the Israeli one. A key part of her work is also to highlight how Western principles of psychotherapy and psychiatry forged in colonial and individualistic cultures are incapable of representing and understanding the psycho-emotional experience of colonized people. We're deeply honored to have Dr. Jabr with us today. I will, before giving her the floor, I will briefly introduce also the other speakers. The second speaker is Dr. Urmitapa Dutta. Urmitapa is an associate professor of psychology and chair of the Greeley Peace Scholar Program at the University of Massachusetts, Lowell. Through her scholar activism, she strives to bear witness to and dismantle everyday violence. Dr. Dutta's journey began in the northeastern borderlands of the Indian state, where she grew up navigating contested terrains of borders and belonging. She has extensively studied the dynamics of coloniality, identity, power, and resistance, while accompanying communities facing ethno-racial persecution in Northeast India. At the heart of her work is a fierce commitment to centering the struggles of those relegated to the margins of nationals and global imaginaries. Dr. Dutta has contributed to the colonial perspectives in psychology that span theorizing from below, dissident pedagogies, and community-engaged research as a form of solidarity praxis. She has written extensively about critical qualitative methods as interventions to combat marginality and exclusion, notably through participatory action research, feminist ethnographies, counter-storytelling, and insurgent poetry. She also currently serves as an associate editor of Peace and Conflict Journal of Peace Psychology. Thank you, Urmitapa, for being with us. I'm deeply honored to share this space with you as well. Our third speaker is Noha Emam Hassanin. Noha is an Egyptian community psychology. She's keenly interested in empowering children and youth without parental care to have the autonomy of changing their own lives and developing the sector of child and youth welfare in Egypt. She received a master's degree in community psychology from the American University in Cairo in 2018, and her thesis was about assessing the resilience of adolescents raised in care homes in Cairo and identifying the factors that facilitated resilience. Since then, she has been working on different projects using participatory methods to engage care experienced youth in program design and policy change. Thank you very much, Noha, for being with us and sharing this space and sharing your experience and knowledge with us. Then our fourth speaker is Rebecca Heslin. Rebecca is the co-founder of Irish Psychologists for Palestine. Irish Psychologists for Palestine were formed in October 2023. They're a diverse group of counseling, clinical, and research psychologists. We were inspired by other civil society groups to organize within our profession and to offer what we can in the struggle for Palestinian liberation. They know that psychology is political and our work is informed by human rights. To date, they have campaigned to our representative body and our government, imagine like the Irish government, that they have been a visible presence at marches and demonstrations. They have also offered weekly support to Palestinian diaspora living in Ireland. They are heartened to see similar organizing happening within the profession internationally. Thank you so much, Rebecca, to you and Irish Psychologists for Palestine to be here with us and share your struggles and experiences. And last but not least, we have Camilla Ponti. Camilla is co-founder of Psicologia per la Palestina, Psychology for Palestine in Italy. She's a development psychologist and psychotherapist in the third year of training. Psychologia per la Palestina is a project created in January 2024 by a group of Italian psychologists and psychology students. The project was born as a complaint to the National Council of the Order of Psychologists and the regional orders, the highest institutional authority of the psychology profession in Italy, because of the double standard displayed by them. In dealing with the war in Ukraine, they immediately took a position and have been acting on several fronts, while instead their attitude was one of silence and complicity towards the Palestinian genocide. Fundamental objective of Psychologia per la Palestina is to disseminate the colonial psychology culture. So after this presentation, also thank you to Camilla at Psychologia per la Palestina for being with us and sharing this space and their struggle. And now I think it's time for me to shut up and leave the floor to our first speakers. But again, I want to thank deeply from our heart for being here with us. It's really an honor to have you, and I look forward to learn from you and your important experience and insights. Thank you, Dr. Samah Jabr. The floor is yours.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for this generous introduction. And listening to you acknowledging genocide and not hiding behind the concept of neutrality and impartiality, I think that you don't need my presentation, but I will do it anyway. So, my name is Samah, and in addition to my responsibility as the head of mental health services in the West Bank, I used to work in Gaza, train professionals in Gaza. I come from Jerusalem, and I start by specifying these different geographical locations because geographical fragmentation is part of the trauma of the Palestinian people. And unlike most Palestinians, I have more privileges to move from one geography to another and to be able to connect with different parts of the fragmented Palestinian land. So the purpose of this presentation is to explore how mental health professionals, including psychologists globally, can stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people and to discuss practical actions that can be taken to support justice, dignity, and liberation in the context of the Palestinian struggle. To explain the context, the historical trauma of Palestinians has been there for more than a century. I think it started with the Balfour Declaration that gave the largest portion of the Palestinian land to Israelis. We call it the promise of this who didn't own anything to those who have no right to the land. And of course, this has created reactions during the British Mandate, and the British Mandate was hostile to Palestinians. And then we reached the Nakba, the massive ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from their towns and villages, and the creation of a refugee population out of the Palestinians. 2/3 of the Palestinian population became refugees, and 2/3 of the land of historical Palestine was lost in between 47 and 48. And of course, there were many reverberations and repercussions for these events. Then there was the big Arab loss in their defense of what remains of the land of historic Palestine in 67. And there were several intifadas after that. So this is just to say that we cannot understand the Palestinian situation without having a good understanding of the framework of historical colonial trauma. And any attempt to avoid and neglect the framework of historical colonial trauma will lead us to over-pathologizing Palestinians and giving them inappropriate diagnoses. So it's a story of geographical fragmentation, community fragmentation, identity fragmentation. Now we have Palestinians of Jerusalem, Palestinians of the West Bank of 48, with Israeli citizenship, with no citizenship at all, like myself, who come from Jerusalem, Palestinians in Gaza, and 2/3 of the Palestinians live in diaspora. Snapshots from the daily ordinary violence in Palestine, restriction of movement, crossing checkpoint from one town to another, to go to university, to go to work, is a suffocating experience that touches almost everyone in Palestine. Political detention before October the 7th, from 67 until October the 7th, it touched more than 20% of the Palestinian population. This is the prevalence, you can imagine. Like almost 38% of the male population experienced political detention, and torture is commonplace. Now, after October the 7th, the intensity of the experience, there is a high escalation in the prevalence, and the intensity of torture and maltreatment is something unprecedented. I have been working in the medical and psychological documentation of torture for more than 20 years. But what I'm listening to now, the testimonies that ex-prisoners are giving to us, is something that I never thought of previously. I never could imagine that something like that can happen. Very, very chilling details. The third most common experience that is part of the daily violence is home demolition. Now we see massive home demolition in Gaza, but home demolition happens every day in Palestine, in Area C of the West Bank, in Jerusalem. If you want to expand your home, if you want to build an extra room for your children, they will come and demolish your home. So home in Jerusalem especially, there are many restrictions on home building and renovation in a way that can control the demographics and can maintain a small minority of Palestinians in Jerusalem. So home demolition is a very big problem. 1/3 of Palestinian homes in Jerusalem are notified that they will be demolished, and people pay excessive amendment excessive fines in order to delay the decision. I've been criticizing the definition of trauma and trying to force our experience into the DSM definition of trauma and PTSD, because we believe that humiliation is the most prevalent traumatic experience in Palestine. Trauma, as it is in the DSM book, is a threat or the real danger to the body or sexual violence. But if your olive grove that you've been waiting for so long and you've been caring for so long gets demolished, gets burnt, if your home gets demolished, if you are forced to bark like a dog in order to cross the checkpoint, this is not considered to be traumatic. according to the textbook. And those experiences are very common in a Palestinian life, in one Palestinian's life. So it's a story of systemic oppression, and it can be best understood through the framework of historical colonial trauma that damages identity, that reverberates among the population, that is transgenerational, and above all, this trauma is deliberate and strategic, and it has a purpose. Now, what's going on? In January 2024, the International Court of Justice judged that the situation in Gaza is plausible genocide, and we have seen many horrors happening there after that date. And this massive trauma has a huge impact on Palestinian people, not only in Gaza, in the West Bank and Jerusalem. People look at what's happening in Gaza and they have what I call as an anticipatory trauma, thinking that this might happen to us. We see children in the West Bank and Jerusalem hoarding food in case this will happen to us. The massive demolition and bombardment in Gaza is spectacular in a way that it will threaten people in the neighborhood. So vicarious trauma is not only limited to Palestinians or people living in the region, but also the Palestinians living in diaspora. They can be re-traumatized while watching what's happening in Gaza, while listening to the awful details of people, of mass graves where we find people blindfolded and handcuffed and shot and killed. And we know that trauma is prevalent in the world, and many people lived wars and colonialism, and they can react to what's going on. So I claim that what's happening in Gaza has global reverberations, and we mental health professionals should care for that. Even if you don't have any human connection, any blood connection, any ethnic, religious connection with Palestinians, as a mental health professional, we should care about this kind of trauma that has many reverberations in the world. Now, for so long, Palestinians have been silenced using the premises of neutrality and impartiality in mental health. I can give you countless examples where my presentations, my interventions in conferences were canceled or silenced because there is a political component, as that was the pretext. One of the latest examples is a talk that I gave to the European Academy for Eating Disorder. They asked me to participate in their webinar. And in that webinar, I spoke about disordered eating. I spoke about cases of severe weight loss and eating disorder where people don't have any body image concern, but people are affected. People in the West Bank and Jerusalem, I'm talking about clinical cases, they present with eating problems, hoarding food, because they are concerned or disgusted by what's taking place in Gaza. And the European Academy of Eating Disorder, they closed the chat conversation immediately when I started speaking, and then they said that there will be a vote whether to publish this webinar or not, and until today, it has not been published. So that's how we are usually silenced. And we saw that this, the premises of neutrality and impartiality were not stressed in the same way when it came to Ukraine. Many mental health organizations issued statements and offered help, a thing that is far from the Palestinian experience. So I talk about ethics, non-neutrality in mental health. Mental health professionals should not maintain a stance of neutrality in the face of social, political, and moral issues, especially when these issues directly impact the well-being of individuals and communities, Instead, they should actively engage with and address these broad systemic and structural issues as part of their ethical responsibility. This approach recognizes that remaining neutral can sometimes imply complicity with injustice and can fail to support the best interest of the clients who are affected by these issues. So our role as mental health professionals when we see a child who is a victim of an ongoing abuse is not only to treat the child for his trauma, but to inform about the abuse and to do our best to stop the abuse. The same goes for our work with other issues of injustice and violence. We have the responsibility to combat the violence, to inform about it, and to give people, to empower people who go through these experiences. A woman with gender-based violence, we give her a list of associations, institutions that can support her if she wants to seek redress and legal support, for example. So the role of psychologists in solidarity should take into consideration the ethical responsibility. In medicine, we talk about do no harm. The principle of bienfaisance and non-malfaisance in the context of health are very important and very important components for our ethical responsibility. Advocacy and awareness, starting by educating ourselves about what's going on and using this education to correct the binary thinking and the cognitive dissonance and the negative representations that are made about Palestinians or about Muslim people or about Orient, the Orientalism, or about the global South. A few days ago, we listened to the Israeli Prime Minister framing the genocide as a war between civilization and barbarism in a very binary way, very simplistic way. And this was the anchor bias for the clowns who were clapping and applauding after every sentence of propaganda and misrepresentation he was using. Who's best than mental health professionals to decorticate, to stand up and analyze what's going on and try to make people more aware and have critical thinking about this pavement, this discourse that paves the way for genocide. For so long, they've been talking about the Palestinian women uterus as a demographic bomb. So that's a genocidal discourse. And now one of the first things that were bombarded in Gaza is the bank for sperms and ovum. It's really, it's not accidental. Those are important aspects of genocide. Building alliances between mental health professionals who are in solidarity outside Palestine, but also alliances with Palestinians, connecting with them and their organizations. Encourage collaboration with them and centralizing the Palestinian voices, highlighting their presence in international forum and in helping them to generate knowledge from their experience. Some practical actions addressing genocide. There is a huge effort among mental health professionals and Western psychology institutions, organizations to mask genocide, to minimize it. It's important to highlight it and to highlight the global effect of it. Policy advocacy, engage in policy advocacy at local, national, and international levels to push for a change that support Palestinian rights and justice, not only to cease fire, but to end the occupation. Collaborate with human rights organizations to amplify advocacy for children, advocacy for victims of torture, participating in the medical and psychological documentation of the experiences of torture, because this is very important evidence for seeking justice for Palestinians. International solidarity and accountability also, we mental health professionals should understand that justice is very important for the well-being of people. To pursue justice, to work for it, even if we don't achieve it, but to believe that justice will not be achieved and to not make any efforts toward it means to be imposed, to be cornered into helplessness. And helplessness, one of the definitions of trauma is that it is the disaster of helplessness. So if we give up on any effort to seek justice and just accept helplessness and our weakness, this means that we are cornered in a traumatic freeze where we cannot challenge the status quo. Public statements and campaigns are part of this work. So for seeking justice and for the validation of the Palestinian feelings and Palestinian experience. Also support Palestinian mental health services, advocate for funding and resources to support mental health services in Palestine, support community-driven solutions. For so long in Palestine, we've been providing psychological first aid, implementing the integration of mental health in primary health care. Now I think we need to shift our thinking and watch what people do to help themselves and try to support their organic efforts. And it's clear that national values and spiritual values play a very important role. The collective aspect of the healing process is very important. Research and documentation, this is important for generating psychological knowledge from Palestine, but also for witnessing and testifying at this period of Palestinian history. And finally, there is a lot to learn from Palestine. Liberation psychology, its practices and its theory can be learned from Palestine at this difficult time. And I share quickly ways, different ways in which international solidarity can be therapeutic for Palestinians and for everyone who's involved in it. International solidarity is therapeutic for Palestinians as well as other oppressed groups around the world. Solidarity is a way of validating our feelings of being subjected to ongoing oppression and trauma, contributes to healing the historical trauma endured by Palestinians. We view that the Palestinian community is wounded, it's not sick. Forget about all the epidemiological studies that use the individual measurement unit and tell you 80% of people in Palestine are depressed. I think this is they ignore the collective trauma and they try to pathologize individuals. Activism for Palestine can inspire mutual and global activism for other causes of justice. International solidarity supports our aspiration to be agents and actors of change and get out of the state of helplessness that will kill us, assassinate us psychologically. If we're frozen into helplessness, this is exactly the plan for the occupation, the plan of the occupation for us, to freeze us, to kill as many as possible, and to freeze the rest in trauma. As we watch all these horrors, we feel helpless and not able to act. But international solidarity helps us to find solutions and encourage us to regain our agency. And finally, I want to share this very good example of international solidarity among mental health professionals. We see different networks of solidarity groups in all these countries, Austria, Belgium, Canada, Australia, UK, USA, who created networks to support the Palestinian mental health workers and to generate knowledge from psychological knowledge from Palestine. And I hope if you don't have a network like this in your country, that you can start thinking of the creation of this network. And finally, solidarity, I want to share this, solidarity's collective power can drive profound change, and mental health professionals united in purpose have the potential to make a lasting and meaningful impact on communities in need. Your involvement at this time can be an asset for any involvement in a peace process in the future. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jabr, for these really important presentations, for reminding of the importance of this, like the historical colonial trauma, and the risk of establishment Western psychology and psychiatry to pathologize suffering which is induced by structures and histories of violence and oppression, and the importance of solidarity and hope. I really want to thank you, because I think it gives us not only the sense of the destruction and the violence, but also of the importance of the courage and resistance and hope, and the importance to center this. So thank you very much for this presentation. I will now go to our second speaker, Dr. Urmitapa Dutta. Urmi, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Samah Jabr. This was such a powerful and an incredibly difficult account. And I know with many of us here, we recognize that your work demands more than anyone should ever have to give. So we're deeply honored to share space with you, and want to really express our gratitude for this ongoing labor that you're doing. My name is Urmitapa, and I join you today from Turtle Island, the unceded indigenous lands now known as North America. As an immigrant here, I remain inadvertently implicated in US settler society of genocide and of forced removal of indigenous people. Today, as I begin to speak, I want to center my remarks by naming and honoring Palestinian people who are at the forefront of struggles for liberation and decolonization, especially Palestinian femmes, activists, organizers, artists, scholars, healers, health workers, water and land protectors, who are not only confronting the patriarchal settler colonial apparatus, but are also teaching us about love. They're showing us what it means to resist unspeakable brutality without forfeiting our own humanity. As psychologists, one of the things that we are called to do in this moment is to bear witness to the Israeli settler colonial assault and genocide against Palestinians in Gaza and in occupied West Bank. And this genocide is an internationally authorized and sanctioned one. Bearing witness is, of course, about observing and recording, but it is much more. It is a moral imperative to be in the world in particular ways, to know it, to act in it, and to wrestle with it. In the words of Mahmoud Darwish, quote, so that this ordinary grief may stop being acceptable, end quote. Witnessing must not be constrained by nation-state borders or allegiances. We know that the modern nation-state is a colonial formation, and to act on those allegiances is to distort our capacity for true solidarity. The same holds for institutions, whether these are universities, professional organizations, or disciplines, including psychology. So I want to make it clear at the outset that I am not invested in resuscitating or rescuing the project of psychology, and certainly not establishment psychology. But it behooves me, as someone who is implicated in the discipline, to demand accountability of psychology and of psychologists. The APA, or American Psychological Association, is, of course, the first stop when we think about establishment psychology. APA, as many of us know here, has a morally corrupt history, often siding with the powers that be when it comes to issues of oppression and injustice. As an institution, APA has not only been complicit in injustice, but actively supported it. The most widely known instance is perhaps of APA's direct involvement in prisoner torture in Guantanamo Bay. Suffice to say, APA's response this time too has reinforced imperialist and colonial logic of elimination and extermination. As Palestinian legal scholar Noura Irakat recently put it, only a few lives shall live and others must die. I want to acknowledge psychologist colleagues who have been fighting back against APA's collusion with oppressive policies and regimes. And we are going to hear more about this from our panelist, Noha. Today, though, I want to speak about silence. Some silences are particularly deafening, such as the silence of US establishment community psychology, the Society for Community Research and Action that positions itself as committed to social justice, to anti-oppression and anti-violence. After a prolonged silence and much advocacy, the Society for Community Research and Action issued a brief statement in February, which, not unlike many other statements, was a masterclass in saying nothing. The statement shied away from naming Israeli settler colonial occupation, apartheid, or genocide. It was an indictment of how both sides' discourse is an extension of violent settler colonial erasures. Some silences are particularly jarring, such as the public silence of so many psychologists who position themselves as decolonial scholars. If your framework or practice does not accommodate the material demands of Palestinian decolonization, then you shouldn't be claiming to do decolonial work. Our commitment to decolonization cannot just be semantic or rhetorical. It must be material, visceral, ethical, and uncompromising. Just as Eve Tuck called for a moratorium on damage-centered research on indigenous communities, we too must demand a moratorium on rhetorical decolonial discourse that remains silent on Palestinian struggles. Organizations have a life of their own, but organizations are ultimately composed of people, of psychologists. Some psychologists remain silent because they fear being labeled anti-Semitic. Others feel that they don't know enough to say something, that they feel the need to be quote unquote balanced. Yet others remain silent because there's too much at stake for them, personally and professionally, because they don't want to be seen as divisive or controversial, because they don't want to be excluded or sidelined. They remain silent out of gratitude towards those that have supported or mentored them, because they don't wish to drive a wedge into collaborations and friendships. Or however else we might be rationalizing our silence and the many form that it takes in this moment. What are we doing? Really, what are we doing to our Palestinian colleagues with our silences and the defense and justification of silence? Yes, there are risks and costs of speaking truth to power, but any risk must always be calibrated against the struggles of Palestinians facing occupation, apartheid, and genocide. Our moral compass of what is at stake must be anchored in our unwavering commitment to care for our Palestinian colleagues. It is them who are in the front lines of struggle right now in Palestine and in many other parts of the world, including right here in the US, which has been authorizing and sanctioning the ongoing occupation and genocide. So how do we disrupt silences? There are many, many different ways to do that, and I share with you some of the ways that we have done that. We disrupt silence by centering Palestinian struggles, by actively integrating Palestinian struggles into everyday discourse and practice on our campuses, as well as our disciplinary and community spaces. It's important to remember that these spaces are rarely given freely, especially in academia. We must proactively create, claim, and take up these spaces. A powerful demonstration of this was the Gaza Solidarity encampments led by students on university campuses around the world. Rejecting dominant narratives that reduce the current genocide to a so-called conflict, Students across a multitude of ethno-racial, gender, and religious identities are demanding that we situate the carnage in Gaza within the broader historical context of the Nakba, of decades of Israeli occupation and apartheid policies, and the suffocating siege on Gaza. And in doing this, they expose the Israeli and US settler colonial logic of elimination that is targeted at Palestinians. We can disrupt colonial silences by amplifying and uplifting the work and voices of Palestinian youth, scholars, journalists, activists, healthcare workers, and artists. We can reclaim space by refusing to enter into any dialogue that asks that we engage with violent settler colonial discourse and dehumanization of Palestinians. We disrupt settler colonial practices via maps and timelines of the Nakba, with materials tracing how our institutions support genocide through connections to arms manufacturers. In the absence of sanctioned space, we can also disrupt silences with our bodies. For example, at a recent psychology conference, we wanted to set up a table for a gathering space to honor martyred luminary Rifat al-Harir, to provide a space for folks to explore solidarity actions for Palestine. When it became apparent that a table was not forthcoming, we came up with a creative solution of embodying the table. And in small and big ways, these are lessons that we have taken from our Palestinian siblings. So in lieu of a physical table, we made and carried canvas bags that named our commitment to listen, learn, and act in solidarity with Palestine. We painted Palestinian symbols of resistance and return on the bags: olive trees, poppies, and keys. We pierced the silence of settler colonial complicity in the conference as we walked the hallways with our bags, placed those bags around in different spaces in the conference, sharing critical educational materials and engaging in dialogue about Palestine solidarity actions. We reclaimed spaces with resistance, artwork, and posters, with kites with long tails, with Palestinian poetry, and with signs boldly proclaiming that Palestine will be free from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. We can reclaim and reconfigure spaces in the classroom. For anyone teaching any sort of critical psychology with social justice commitments, be it community, clinical, social, or any other psychology for that matter, we can and absolutely must weave into our teaching the complex tapestry of Palestinian resistance and survival in the face of settler colonial occupation. However, the need for dialogue and learning must never take precedence over the dignity of Palestinian lives. As educators, we must refuse to engage or allow space for any kind of discourse that either intentionally or inadvertently puts Palestinian lives, rights, or desires up for debate. That the rights of historically dispossessed groups are not up for debate is a core guideline in my class, and I anchor it and assert it heavily in conversations about Palestine. If anyone here is interested in pedagogical resources for teaching Palestine, I'm happy to connect offline. I'll share my email in the chat later. These endeavors that I'm talking about aren't big, but they do disrupt the suffocating silences. They shatter institutionalized narratives that masquerade as balanced, as neutral, or as factual. We cause cracks in the facade of normalcy, and we refuse to let settler colonial discourses go unnamed and unchallenged, and practices really, especially on our campuses and in various disciplinary groups that we're a part of. We can institute these cracks anywhere and everywhere, our home spaces to classrooms to public forums, from listservs to conferences and speaking opportunities, from our university campuses to our local community organizing spaces. We must leverage every single platform available to us to name Palestinian struggles and to highlight the interconnectedness of Palestinian liberation with other anti-oppressive struggles. As I end my remarks, I want to return to the topic of silence, to reiterate the need to continually examine silences, our own and also that of other people and institutions, to ask, who does it serve to be concerned with civility in the wake of genocide? Who or what does our silence protect? At what cost? and who bears this cost? So in closing, I want to remind us of a quote by Cornel West. Justice is what love looks like in public. In times of genocide, our moral imperative is clear. We cannot retreat into abstractions or silence. Instead, we must translate our convictions into bold, unapologetic, unmistakable public acts. Our solidarity with Palestinian struggles must be tangible, felt, heard, and seen across the different spaces that we occupy, spaces that we claim, and spaces that we transgress. So I'll end my comments here. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Urmi. That was really a powerful talk, and thanks to take us to accompany us to interrogate this question of the silence. Who benefit from this silence? Who design and contribute to maintain this silence? And also what we can do in different and oftentimes small ways, but still nonetheless significant ways to disrupt this silence in creative ways. And I think that's a moral duty to do that. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. And I will now leave the floor to our next speaker, who's Noha Hassanin. Noha, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Francesca.
Hi. And
Wow, oh, go ahead, Francesca.
No, I was just thinking that Miles will then upload your slides. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, wow, Urmi, this was incredibly inspiring. Thank you for sharing. Dr. Samah, I think you said it all. Thank you so much for I think you just said it all, you know. A lot of the things I think most of us want to say, you just said it loud and clear. So thank you so much. And I really acknowledge and appreciate everything you're doing. Let me start by I'm here representing my colleagues. We took this journey together. We're a group of graduates from the community psychology program from the American University in Cairo. We took this journey together to learn, fight, resist mainstream psychology. Like always, mainstream psychology organizations always take a clear stand to support their own political agendas. And unfortunately, most of the time, they're not with justice. I've been a member of SCRAW, the Society for Community Research and Action, which is Division 27 of the APA, American Psychological Association. And I've been really fascinated by SCRAW since I was a student. I've been a member since 2017. And it was just, for me, amazing to find so many like-minded people in one place, speaking the same language. I've been impressed by the publications and the biennials, people talking about decoloniality, talking about grassroots initiatives, and I've been really looking forward to them. And after the start of the genocide, you can, in October, I was really surprised, like Urmi said, it was complete silence. Nobody was talking about anything, although the listserv would be on fire on any topic, any random, sometimes useless topic. They would talk non-stop about it. I think Urmi is the first one who broke the silence on the 31st of October by the first email, which was beautiful, emotional, which really summed up the whole situation. Of course, she got Zionist reply saying that she's talking about the one-sided way of the issue. Then finally, SCRA leadership started to reply on November 10th. And it's better that it would have been better if they didn't reply, actually, because their email really portrayed the genocide as an equal struggle of power. They explicitly equalized the oppressor and the oppressed. Their neutrality was putting things completely out of context and completely disregarded the 76 years of settler colonial apartheid, and decided to make that equal to the October 7th attacks. Oh, I forgot to share the slides. Sorry about that. Okay. You can see them all right now.
That's great. Yeah, brilliant.
The email for us actually was a great frustration and disappointment. After all of this silence, how could an organization that the main driver of its foundation is social justice and stay neutral in front of a live-streamed genocide? How could prominent community psychologists who inspired us all with their publications, who have most of their research talking about promoting social justice, empowering communities, giving voice to the voiceless, acknowledging Aboriginal practices, admitting research coloniality, how could they be neutral in front of a constant bombing of densely populated areas where half of the population of Gaza are children, almost half of them? And the daily rate in Gaza is higher than actually any other major conflict in the 21st century. Right now, we're all being tested. Our humanity is being tested. What is our role in our area of influence? Everyone joining this webinar should all ask our questions. There's no room for neutrality here. You can't be neutral. If you say to yourself, this is complicated, this is far away from me, then I advise you to look into your values and beliefs. It's a settler colonial apartheid. We cannot beautify this term. There are evidence from scholars and historians from all over the world, including actually Israeli historians, who would assert this time and again, that we are in front of a settler colonial apartheid. And I'll leave you with this quote that actually says it all. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. So after the very disappointing email from SCRA, we decided as a group to draft and share a statement. We first shared the statement with the president, the SCRA president, and we got no reply, of course. Then we decided to circulate the statement among our colleagues on the listserv. We got a lot of interactions. And in the statement, we said it clearly. We tried to put things in context as much as possible. And we were advised, we were lucky enough to find scholars and professionals in the SCRA who were willing to help us, who knew the dynamics and the politics inside SCRA and the APA. So they supported us in sending a policy paper to the policy committee. Unfortunately, it was rejected, just explicitly rejected in December. So we decided to write another policy paper, and finally they did accept it. It took, of course, a lot of time. So finally, SCRA endorsed this statement in February 2024 for an immediate ceasefire. This is the statement that is currently on their website. The thing is, we almost gave up through the journey, and we're not even happy with, as Urmi said, this does not say everything in the statement. It's just about ceasing fire. And to us, we almost gave up through this journey because you're told all your life that this is, we know about the APA, as Urmi said, and I'll say this in a minute about how Zionist they are. But SCRA, it's built on social justice. So it didn't make any sense that they wouldn't take a stance in this. So to us, the lessons learned that even if it's a small achievement, given what's going on currently in Gaza and having this statement, we felt that this is nothing. This is nothing in comparison to what the people are feeling. We felt so helpless. But at this moment, as a group, and this is the solidarity part, this is the sense of community part, that we were a group. So it's important that we gathered, like Dr. Samah said, and like Urmi said, it's important that we're together as a group. It's important to build this kind of solidarity so that we can move forward. It's important to get support from experts who know the inside outs of those organizations. It's important to acknowledge the colonial nature of mainstream psychology organizations. One of the things that evidence that we've seen, or maybe me myself I knew, but didn't really think about it. I was so immersed in the practical work that the mainstream psychology organizations, almost most of them are colonial. We have evidence that the European Federation of Psychologists they did reject the declaration on colonialism in 2015. They just don't want to admit the coloniality and the effects it caused to the global West, the global South. The American Psychological Association, as Ormi said, there is evidence. I mean, there's a 500-page report actually stating and proving that they did collude with the Bush government in torturing prisoners in Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib. And this collusion was one of the greatest ethical breaches in the history of psychology, and yet nobody talks about it. I mean, after this report was out, there was no, like, they didn't even apologize. I mean, APA just got away with it. And the same with the European Federation of Psychologists Association. And of course, the British Psychology Association has a long legacy of racism, and yet they don't apologize or attempt to make any amends for what they did through the years. So it's important for us to know this. It's important that we educate ourselves about history. We cannot understand this situation, this genocide, without going back to history. It's a long history, and as Dr. Samah said, it's from the Darfur. A lot of us would say it's started with the 1948 declaration, but it actually started in the 1917 Darfur Declaration, because this was the declaration of war. This was really the start. The second thing is acknowledging the power of standing with justice. You might be alone in this, you might be a small group, you might feel that mainstream psychology organizations are huge or more powerful, but standing with justice, you always have the power. The other thing is creating cracks in mainstream psychology, even if it's something very small. I mean, the statement, to a lot of us, after the statement was approved, we felt this is insignificant. This is nothing in comparison to the sufferings of the people in Gaza. But creating such cracks, creating this noise so that there is this counter voice to mainstream psychology is important. And joining the steadfast resistance of decolonizing psychology, there are a lot of groups in a lot of the places in Africa, in Asia, a lot of the places, and even in North America. I could imagine if we joined forces, the resistance would be more powerful. Being critical all the time, being critical of the research. I myself graduated from a colonized university. I mean, a country like Egypt where there is neo-colonization in it. I could reflect, and I didn't properly reflect on that until after the genocide, where all the theories we learned, we never learned to be critical and criticize the theories that were taught in the classrooms. But now it's our turn. Now it's our duty, whoever we are, as scholars, as professors, practitioners, we need to be critical on those theories, and we need to get our own theories that are, like Dr. Samah said just now, there is the concepts of trauma, resilience, they're completely different in different contexts. In the global South, it's a completely different scenario, and a completely different scenario, especially if you have a war going on for decades. And celebrating the small achievements is very, very important. It could be very frustrating at times. It's important to celebrate the small achievements, and it's important to take care of ourselves. Self-care is essential in these areas. I mean, you could get vicarious trauma just looking at the screen from your home. You don't necessarily have to be in the war zone to get vicarious trauma. So it's important that we take care of ourselves and join the global resistance. And finally, advocate for Palestinian liberation. As Nelson Mandela said, but we know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noha, for your really inspiring talk. And thank you for all your efforts also within the SCRA. I remember very well when you circulated, you and Urmi, you circulated the statements, and it was very important, and I think it was part of like the journey that take us here today, at least from my side of things. So thank you very much for this. for the efforts and courage to keep on struggling in all our ways, from small to bigger struggles. So before leaving the floor to our first speaker, Rebecca, just very briefly to say that we have a Q&A chat. So any participant who want to share like some questions or for them the Q&A, you can type them in the Q&A chat. And some team members will collect them. Also for someone who asked about the registration, so we are recording the webinar. As I mentioned before, we will make it available both on the ECPA YouTube channel, on the ECPA website. So if someone from the ECPA team member will again in the Q&A chat post the links so that you can all get them, save them, and also if you want you can register, sign up for the newsletters. We'll also say in the newsletter when the videos are available, but I think as soon as possible. And we're all committed to make this as available and disseminate it as much as possible to everyone. That's the main aim, I guess. So, Rebecca, the floor is yours, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. And thank you to Dr. Jabr, Noha, and Urmi as well. It's relieving in a sense to be in a space like this, to hear a lot of our principles and how we think being reflected globally, that's a source of comfort in these really dark and horrifying days. For us, I suppose, as a group, we organised in October of last year, and we too were struck by the silence in the international community of psychology. We felt a deep sense, as we always have, of solidarity and connection to our Palestinian siblings. We were very conscious of the struggles that Palestinians have been facing over the last 75 years and longer, and very conscious of, for all of us, thinking about intersectionality and power and our ethical responsibility to do something with the power that we have and the voice that we have. In organising, I suppose Ireland is a specific context to organise in, so there were many privileges alongside that as well, in a long-standing historical connection to the Palestinian struggles. So it's not difficult to organise in Ireland. 71% of the population are very clear that what is happening is genocide. And for us, principally as an organisation, we were organising around the principles of centering Palestinian voice, but also thinking about power, how we can use our power, and also, where we weren't seeing representation and where we weren't seeing leadership, we thought it was really important to lead by example, to push the Overton window and to show that it could be done, that this is not difficult. We are in a particular context where it's very easy to organise. We're building on the work of other organisations in the community, such as the Irish Palestine Solidarity Campaign. There was a trade union, Friends of Palestine. Our workers' unions are all pro-Palestinian and supportive of the Palestinian struggle. So we were uniquely placed to organise within our profession in a supportive context to show that it could be done. Other organisations such as Academics for Palestine and Students for Palestine organised encampments, and our work really was about trying to support and advocate and work alongside all of these different sectors of civil society who were organising in unprecedented volume. We've over 100 different civil society campaigns or organisations supporting our national demonstrations, and everybody is working together to highlight the struggle, to make that, to put that into common parlance, to show it can be done, and to organise and to push for governmental reform, for change. So for us, I suppose, in thinking about it, like for psychology, and I can only speak for myself rather than the group here, but one of my big criticisms, I suppose, of psychology and Western psychology specifically is the tendency to isolate the problem or the symptom within the individual and delineate it from its context, to remove people from their context and to look at their symptoms without the broader backdrop of what contributes to that. So for us, it was really important to speak to context and to speak truth to power, and to be really, really specific with the words that we use, because our words are powerful and they're important, and we were refusing to collude with a narrative where this is a humanitarian disaster, or, you know, this inevitable catastrophe that is just chance happening in Palestine. So we were specific in using the words apartheid, we were specific in using the words settler colonialism, and we're specific in using the word genocide, because that is what's happening, and we are refusing to collude with any narrative that denies that material reality for Palestinians. So for us, in terms of our work, it really is about looking to leaders like Dr. Jabr. I also, you know, reading kind of a lot of Shihai's work, you know, the piece around looking at hope as a collective act, that it's something that we do to sustain our movements, and that's actually essential that we collectively envisage that this is possible and that we work together, and hope is a revolutionary practice. And that's something that we collectively work on. So we kind of have a couple of functions in that we encouraged our representative body to be very clear about a statement about what was happening. We produced one ourselves. We also wrote to our governmental representatives, and we did that as an open letter, collected as many signatories as possible and published it in as big a paper as we could get. An open letter where we specifically named what was happening, and we were specific in the demands that we were asking for, which was a recognition of the genocide and also a call for full compliance with the BDS National Committee, so that we would look at economic sanctions in line with international law. So for example, the EU Med agreement, which grants specific trading privileges to Israel, that there's a human rights clause within that Israel is in violation of. So looking at what can we do practically to implement economic sanctions and to have consequence for breaches of international law, which have been documented for the world to see. We know that this is happening, and we know that we have a duty of care to Palestine that the world is failing in currently. So we pushed in that direction, and we also, looking at our friends and looking at our Palestinian friends specifically in the community, how do we support activists? What do we do to help sustain the movements, knowing that everyone is tired? Everybody is feeling this so deeply. We're all heartbroken, but resolute and steadfast, and we're not going anywhere. We're going to keep pushing as long as it takes. So how do we build stronger communities? So initially we started off with doing a support group that ran weekly and was open to anybody in Ireland who was affected by what was happening. And more recently, we kind of looked to that, and we're kind of created a Palestinian specific support group. Now, in terms of learnings, there's certain pieces that we can't provide. None of us speak Arabic. There's parts where, you know, culturally there are differences. There's pieces that we can't attend to that we would love to, if we can expand and kind of work to kind of build the movement and get more numbers essentially, so that we can meet these specific needs. So that's one thing that we've done, is that consistent space that people can turn up whenever they want. There's no obligation to come every week, but that it's always there if people need it, and that's important to us to be able to offer that space. I suppose in terms of learnings, it's about the group. This is about pushes becoming cracks, and that when we push together, the cracks are bigger. So it's the bit about organizing with our communities, taking learnings from it, not being afraid to get it wrong, because the antidote to that paralysis that we feel at the horror of what's happening, the antidote to that paralysis is action. It's doing something. It's doing something in your profession. It's doing something in your community. It's having a conversation at work. I have a tattoo of a key on my arm, and every person that asks me about it, I tell them about the Palestinian struggle. I tell them what happened. So the part is creating conversations, creating discourse. It's not about me. It's not about my group. It's about how we work together. And it shouldn't be about ego. And that's the learning as well, that sometimes people, you know, for all of us, we want to lead and we want to do it right, and we are afraid to make mistakes. But it's looking at the strengths across different sectors of society, that if we all do our bit, if we all act, if we all work together, and it's going to look like different actions for different groups, because maybe the doctors can't get involved with direct action specifically, or whatever that is, but it's that we all support each other and we row in behind each other, and that together, that's what's going to topple this, is the affection of like the implementation of consequence for the violations of the ethical moral code that we sign up to as human beings, that is part of our fabric and part of our core. and that our solidarity is bone deep, it's unwavering, it's going nowhere. So the bit is about how do we mind each other in praxis? How do we mind each other in these situations? I think it is about looking to Palestine for guidance. Like I think often about Rafiq Sieda's poem, we teach life, sir. In the middle of all of this, we teach life, sir. We teach love. We see it every single day. That none of what is happening is motivated by a hatred from the Palestinian side. It could only be motivated by love. And that's the same with our work. It could only come from a place of love. It's me done.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you also for ending with this call to centering love in all our actions, in all our struggles, in everything that we try to do to contribute towards struggles for justice, liberation, and dignity. And I think that's really, really, really important. So last but not least, we have Camilla Ponti from Psicologia per la Palestina, Psychology for Palestine in Italy. Camilla, the floor is yours.
Okay, so thank you all for being here, and we are truly grateful for this opportunity and for being here together. And thank you so much for all the previous intervention, which have been crucial and so important. As anticipated by Francesca, as Psychology for Palestine, today we would like to share with you a part of our struggle in Italy. Psicologia per la Palestina is a project created in January 2024 by a group of Italian psychologists and psychology students. As we say before, this project was born as a complaint to the National Council of the Order of Psychologists and the regional orders that are the highest institutional authorities of the psychology profession in Italy, because of the double standard displayed by them. In dealing with the war in Ukraine, they immediately took a position and have been active on several fronts. First, with a statement of support and solidarity to the Ukrainian people and to the Ukrainian mental health professionals, and later through the provision of free psychological support service for Italian, and Italian population in Italy, and through the creation of seminars for the profession, educational materials, and moments of discussion with the citizen, while instead, towards the Palestinian genocide, their attitude was one of silence and total complicity. Today, they have come out with a press release, which we'll discuss in a second moment. And starting from this obvious difference in institutional attitudes, one of the major long-term goals of Psychologia per la Palestina is to highlight the presence of institutional racism within the Italian psychology profession, and to disseminate the colonial anti-racist and intersectional transfeminist psychology culture, both practical and theoretical. As a first step in this project of compliant, Psicologia per la Palestina has created a petition open to anyone to ask the National Council of the Order of Psychologists and the regional orders the following: an immediate recognition and condemnation of the genocide of the Palestinian people, and the provision of the same service created following the war outbreak in Ukraine. To the present day, the petition has exceeded the 600,000 signature, involving more than 41 other countries besides Italy. And then the petition was transformed into an official letter to the orders, to which all signatures were also attached and sent on April 26th, May 7th, and May 21st. On May 11th, two psychologists from Psychologia per la Palestina had an exchange with the president of the National Council of the Order of Psychologists and the Turin Book Fair during an event organized by the president himself, which had its central theme, the mental health of teenagers in Italy. And our psychologists talked about the letter we sent to the orders and asked the president for an explanation of the institutional silence regarding the Palestinian genocide. And despite the fact that Psychologia per la Palestina had already sent 2 emails, the president claimed to be unaware of the project and gave totally inadequate reasons for their absolute silence. And the people present at the event were very supportive of our psychologist intervention. And following this exchange, which was also recorded by media and journalists, many people, including several mental health professionals, started to write under the National Council of the Order of Psychologists and National Council of the Order of Psychologists President's Instagram post, calling for an immediate stance against the genocide of the Palestinian people and for the provision of the same service created for Ukraine. The president, under his personal profile post, deleted the comments and prevented people from expressing themselves, silencing them and censoring their worth. And we think as Psychologia per la Palestina that such an act of censure coming from the president is unacceptable. However, Psychologia per la Palestina interventions yield results, even if they have been very different from those we hoped for. On May 23rd, the National Council shared a press release. And in this press release, they just call for a ceasefire in Gaza without ever acknowledging the genocide of the Palestinian people. And furthermore, it provides an anti-historical and colonial view of the situation in Palestine since 1948 and portrays the Palestinian people as a victim deprived of any kind of agency and capacity for resistance. And in this press release, they calls for an activation for Palestinian and Italo-Palestinian people living in Italy of all the services provided following the war outbreak in Ukraine. And to the present date, none of this service has been yet activated. In addition to this, for the war in Ukraine, a specific section has been created within the National Council of the Order of Psychologists website entitled War Emergency, which contains various educational materials and different guidelines. In the press release, it is written how specific materials were added to this section with respect to the situation in Gaza. However, what has been included in this content with very broad and general topics, and it talks almost about other world conflicts and not about the Palestinian genocide, and it claims to extend the experience of Palestinian people to that of any other population, providing a view of the reality of non-Western people as non-specific and interchangeable. And as Psychologia per la Palestina, we are convinced that indifference, superficiality, and generalization are amongst the deepest form of racism. So the day after the National Council of the Order of Psychology press release came out, Psicologia per la Palestina created another one in response, underlining the imperative of recognition of the genocide of Palestinian people and highlighting the absolute necessity of internal self-education for mental health professionals with respect to the issue of Palestine from a decolonial and anti-racist perspective. Indeed, through the use of colonial, Eurocentric, and white-centric lenses, it's not possible to work with the experience of a person who has been living a condition of colonial violence for 76 years. Moreover, the collective and historical trauma being experienced by the Palestinian people cannot be integrated and symbolized without its prior recognition. And the National Council never responded to our press release. Therefore, in June 9th, Psychologia per la Palestina launched an email bombing involving psychology students and psychologists from all over Italy to be sent to the National Council and to their regional order of affiliation, asking for the recognition of Palestinian genocide and the activation of internal training courses for mental health professionals. And in the absence of internal training, seminars, and dialogue on the subject organized by the National Council, Psychologia per la Palestina went to various Italian universities to hold workshops, collective readings, and moments of confrontation and sharing of resistance practice. In addition to this, we participated in several events, and on June 25th, two Psychologia per la Palestina psychologists participated as speakers in an institutional event on the topic of human rights and armed conflict, for which they had been invited by the seminar organizers themselves. And the speeches had been decided, organized, and agreed upon beforehand, following the intervention of the first Psychologia per la Palestina psychologist. The second one was silenced and prevented from speaking. And so once again, an institutional reality became the author of censorship and silencing our voice that were speaking about Palestinian genocide and denouncing the institutional silence surrounding the Palestinian genocide. And after more than 9 months of the escalation of the Palestinian genocide, after all the atrocities committed and witnessed on a daily basis towards the Palestinian people, the maintenance of, to say at least, neutral position by the National Council and the regional orders can only be considered as a complicit position. Because during a genocide, bad information and silence, especially when acted upon by institutional office that are responsible for protecting the mental health of the community, are synonymous with support and protection of the oppressor. And Psychologia per la Palestina therefore stands and will continue to stand in stark contrast to the position taken by an Italian psychological institution, alongside the Palestinian resistance in all its form, which it recognizes as one of the most important protective factors for mental health of Palestinian people. And Psychologia per la Palestina will continue its struggle with the national orders until the recognition of the Palestinian genocide and the creation of internal and external moments of decolonial and anti-racist training, dialogue, and confrontation. And mental health, we really believe that it is a political issue, and the attempt to deprive it of its dimension is nothing more than a desire to continue the power dynamics that keep some population oppressed over others. And Psychologia per la Palestina will always stand by the oppressed people struggling for their own liberation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Camilla. I think it was a fantastic way to end this round of conversation, and thank to you and Psicologia per la Palestina for your important work in really trying to challenge Italian national orders that have been like extremely and awfully silent in front of what's happening. So really, thank you very much. So I guess we ended the very inspiring round of conversation, and we have now some space for questions, discussions. Also, all the speakers, we are free also to ask questions to each other if you want. I certainly have some, but also look forward to leave some space for other people who may want to share. There's a chat, Q&A chat, where ECPA colleagues are collecting questions, so please feel free to use that. I can see already some messages. Macarena, who left us, said, good afternoon. Unfortunately, I have to leave early, but I would like to thank all the speakers. Leave the meeting with so much to think about. Free Palestine from Brazil. Emam, thank you for such amazing support and efforts to stand with justice. It brings tears to my eyes to know that we Palestinians are not alone in our struggle to achieve justice and freedom. Thank you so much, Emam, also for being with us today. And yes, you're not alone, and we are with you, and we'll try as much as possible to be with you in challenging this the violence and the settler colonial violence, occupation, and genocide. Many thanks for the excellent webinar. So a lot of important comments. Dr. Jabr, I've seen you unmuted yourself. You want to share something with us, as you were the first one to speak. Actually, I was really willing to ask you after this round of conversations what you think, if you want to add something, and what you think it's important for us, particularly international psychologists, mental health workers, social workers in solidarity, where is important to concentrate our efforts?
First, I want to congratulate you on putting together all these excellent speakers and this very interesting theme. Second, I want to acknowledge that I know many people who are very informed about Palestine, mental health professionals, very informed, who feel intimidated when they are alone. Within their institutions, they feel intimidated. And I think it is already some people experienced bad treatment. Some people were lost their jobs. They had to attend some hearings for some statements or for their social media statements. And I think it's important to think of creating a legal body that supports mental health professionals, because some people cannot bear the legal consequences. And it will be empowering, because if we network in an effective way, and if we create our small organizations, I think we will have more influence within mainstream organizations. Otherwise, many of the courageous people might feel intimidated within mainstream organizations and when they act alone. now there is a spirit of enthusiasm about all this important discourse, but it can be frightening sometimes when people act alone.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really an important point. Create infrastructures and organizations that can support the efforts also of individual and collective efforts and give us more strength and more protection, because that's very important what you said and very true. Many people have been threatened and the costs are high, although obviously Palestinian people on the grounds are the ones who are bearing the highest costs, and therefore that's important, as Urmi was saying before, to always remember that the costs.
But that can also help Palestinians. I want to give the example of Dr. Nadira Shalhoub-Koverkian. She's an important scholar who says many things about the situation in Palestine, and she was interrogated and arrested at the beginning of these attacks. But there was an important reaction from solidarity groups, and I think that played a little role in making her situation easier. So it's really important also to protect Palestinian health professionals and mental health professionals.
Thank you. We have a few questions here. So I will read them, and then anyone who wants can share their insights and thoughts on this. So Emam is asking, I have a question about what is next, which I think somehow is connected to what Dr. Jabr was also discussing now. Then there's a question for Noha in particular. Can we connect and share different actions and initiatives of mental health support and wrap around care in Cairo, Egypt, where there are so many Palestinians in need of support? There's a contact of a person, and maybe Noha, we can then share it with you, who want to.
Yes, I can just briefly say something about that, which is very, very important, because there are scattered efforts everywhere. Like, there are a lot of Palestinians currently in Egypt, and there are a lot of volunteering groups who are trying to support. But still, this connection, as Dr. Samah just said, we need to have this a group of people, an entity, somewhere they can know, for example, like how we do in community psychology, like an asset or service map, where they can know where I want mental health, I'll go to this place. If I want to, for example, rent a house, I go to this organization, etc. So I think we really need to organize efforts. So thank you for I'll definitely connect with you and see what we can do about that. So thank you about that.
And I have a question to Noha, if I may. You are based in Egypt, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And probably in the Arab world, there are two community mental health programs, one in Egypt, one in the Arab University of Cairo, and the other one in Birzeit, at Birzeit University. I don't know if you know this, but
yes, yes.
I wanted to ask you, is it possible at all to start the first Arab Palestine mental health network? Because, we've been asking people to create their local solidarity networks, and many Western countries responded, and now colleagues in Brazil are starting their network. But I think it's very important also to have one in the Arab world, and Egypt has a central role, I think. So if you have colleagues who are interested in this, we will we will be communicating. I'm happy to communicate with you to make it easier.
This would be fantastic. Actually, it's something that my colleagues and I have been thinking of since the disappointments we got from SCRA. The main conclusion we got that we need our own network so we can voice out our concerns loud and clear without being restricted by so many Zionists in the different groups. So definitely, thank you so much for this suggestion.
So there are a couple of more questions. So one is a comment from Patrizia Meringolo in Florence. Community psychologists are working with university movement and with health professionals for Gaza. It would be important to improve our networks. And then there's another question from Oxje Savas. I had a question about people's thoughts on BDS and how to organize the scattered efforts within psychology to organize a BDS, and what else should we be thinking about for organizing this? That's very important question. So I don't know who wants to jump in and share some thoughts.
Maybe I can say something about the difference between BDS and the networks, because we were debating whether, like at the beginning, when people approached us saying that they are interested in supporting mental health in Palestine, already BDS was the most active global organization in support of Palestinians. And we wanted to start the networks. We could have started the networks as a subgroup of BDS with interest on mental health. But because of all the delegalization against BDS in many Western places, so we tried to avoid that part and to give more room and freedom for the network. Even though the networks, they have launched collective don't go campaigns. You know, for so long, international mental health organizations, relational psychology and psychoanalytic groups, the international organizations in cognitive behavioral therapy, they tried to call for international meetings in Israel. And the networks argued that Tel Aviv is not a place open to everybody. Pro-Palestinian activists are not welcome there. Many Palestinians cannot go there. Many people from the Arab world cannot go there. So we launched a Don't Go campaign, and BDS supported us in the Don't Go campaign. And that was specific action in the field of mental health. And I think that this differentiation also helped many people who are afraid, many professionals who don't want to just do things that is purely political. Like they got interested in the networks and joined the networks because they have the professional interest. They can also learn something about global mental health, running mental health in a crisis region. So that was the distinction. We might collaborate for some activities, but we are differentiated.
Thank you, Samah. I think, yeah, that was really important. I don't know if someone else wants to jump in and add some ideas and thoughts on this issue of BDS.
May I, Francesca, if that's okay? I do think I'm hearing what Dr. Jabr is saying, and I think absolutely. I have two hats. I'm in Psychologist for Palestine Ireland. I'm also involved in the Irish Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, and we're aligned with the BDS National Committee in terms of our strategy. BDS is super powerful. It also is worth noting that the recent ICJ ruling further legitimizes the BDS National Committee, particularly within the European context. And there is mass organizing specifically around the idea of a medical boycott, that's something that might be possible if we're thinking about mental health networks as well, thinking about TIVA as a strategic target. So I think it would be helpful for people to link with, if you're curious, if you want to find out more, do link with the BDS National Committee, because they're really, really experienced and experts at strategy. What we're seeing across the board with people who are less maybe aware of how strategic boycotts work is a lot of organic and scattershot boycott, whereas targeted specific boycotts identified and strategized by the BDS National Committee are super powerful. We're seeing huge impacts on companies like AXA, on Puma, that there's meaningful targets, because what that operates on then is a deterrent from further investment. So seeing that Intel pulled an entire giant investment from the occupied territories based on BDS. So what I'm saying is BDS is powerful. Find out more about it and do see what you can do within your community, see what's already being done. Would be my advice on that, just based on my other hat.
And if I can, and talking also about regarding what to do for the future. And for example, we also collaborate with the local realities in the various regions where we live. And we also participated in student intifadas. And in Torino, during the occupation of university, the Department of Psychology voted for the end of collaboration with Israel's universities after the request of the students. So for us, for example, it's very important really to stay with all the local communities and all the local realities and to engage students, because we really think that also talking with students, talking with the young people, and go in universities where they teach only colonial psychologies and the rest is psychology, is a very fundamental part of the struggle and of our struggle, and to spread the colonial culture in psychology's place.
Urmi, Noha, would you like to add anything?
I'm just, I'm sitting with what everyone has shared, and thank you so much, for all of the ways that you're staging interventions. I think I'll just sort of, and I think this is something that I'm hearing in what everyone is saying, is that part of the bigger strategy is around making things really inconvenient for people around us, for people in positions of power. And I mean, there are so many efforts, whether it's in our institutions, on our campuses, within disciplinary areas, that, that they isolate you. And that's one way of making you give up, to making you feel like no one is listening. So, so then you might as well just stop. But I think really knowing that it goes both ways, that as much as they can make life difficult for us, we too can do that. And there is so much of power in naming things and doing things, and to just not stop speaking. And and I'm using the word speaking loosely, that speaking can take many different forms. It's not always just speaking in person. So I think that's just something that I want to highlight. And I also again want to reiterate that so much of what I know that I have learned about struggle is from my Palestinian friends in struggle, my Palestinian colleagues in struggle. So I do I do want to acknowledge that and name that that we are here, we are able to show up in these ways, and strive to show up in these ways because of what we have learned from from our Palestinian siblings. And that's really, you know, if they are not stopping, neither do we. And I know that for me, or when I talk to my students, that we don't, you know, there is no question of what the end point is. You know, we do this as long as we have to, and that's what we're here for.
Thank you. Thank you, Urmi. So there are a few last questions and comments. Maybe I will read them and leave you the floor for the last round, and then we close, as we have been together for 2 hours. And although, I mean, it's an honor to share this space, and I deeply appreciate your generosity. Also, where it's a long time, and so I think it's good to then wrap up. So,
Francesca, sorry to interrupt. Samah had her hand up. So.
Sorry.
Yeah, if I may, I also want to suggest that I know it's difficult to create a different discourse within our organizations, but I think it's much easier to have a meaningful and influential discourse within ordinary people, to talk through journals, magazine, position yourself as a mental health expert who can give a psychological reading of what's going on, write opinion pieces, talk to the general public. People appreciate the status of health professionals and what they have to say. And maybe little by little, we can change the discourse. And there will be another point where mental health institutions, if you achieve some difference at the level of the general public, then organizations, mental health organizations, will take you more seriously. I want, if I may, Francesca, you speak Portuguese, right?
Yes, that's correct. I try at least.
I got this book published in Portuguese recently in Brazil.
Wow.
And I want to announce to Camilla that I will be again in Milano and other Italian cities because another book will be published. It's October the 7th, 2024. And it's about bearing witness, 1 year of genocide. So I think speaking to the general public is very important. Our colleagues are deaf. They are less open. My assumption when I started my profession in mental health, I thought that mental health professionals are more progressive. But I think the general population are less biased and more open to a new discourse.
Thank you so much, Samah. And yeah, I will look for the book. I really look forward to reading it, and also hopefully to listen to you in Milan and meet you in person would be amazing.
Pleasure.
So the last comments. So one is, can we as mental health professionals around the world gather in small clusters as 5 to 8 clinicians to serve and support for designated mental health colleagues in Palestine? Maybe can Dr. Jabr provide names and contacts of people in Palestine we can support? This was one. Then there was another one. I believe that we need 2 elements in our network, one to support the mental health actors, and one for the people who are suffering from the ongoing trauma because of the situation in Gaza. I feel that we are not only need to educate students, but also to invite other community members from other universities in our Arab countries to join our movement and our space. And then a last one is always a question for Dr. Jabr. Where can we find more details about your clinical experience on eating disorders connected with experience of genocide?
Okay.
From Federica.
I will start by the last one. My paper on disordered eating, this is how I call it, because it's different. The etiology is different than eating disorder. And there is no body image problem in the cases that I reported. I'm drafting a paper. It's not yet published. And I'm drafting another interesting paper, which I hope to be published soon in a scholarly paper about kites and the significance of kites for Palestinians. And I'm planning a workshop for children who can express themselves, can rework through the loss and grief through kites. And by the way, kites is a common theme for people who have restriction on movement and who feel they cannot move much. So I discuss all these things in this paper. I hope to get it published soon. But that's my problem with scholarly papers. You have to pay. I have to work hard, very, very hard to get my thing in a scholarly journal. And then colleagues who are interested have to pay money to the industrial part of journals to be able to read. That's why I prefer this lay people writing. That's why I prefer. But anyway, there are interesting things that can be drafted from the Palestinian experience now. And I invite whoever is interested to join us in writing these things, these observations. Now, as for helping Palestinian colleagues, we welcome equal partnership in writing. Some of our colleagues, especially in Gaza, they are traumatized themselves. So helping the helpers would be very good. Also colleagues from the West Bank, we lost 13 people from the health system since October the 7th here in the West Bank, but also many more in Gaza. It doesn't go through a webinar. I think if you're interested if you have resources or organizations or networks that are interested in helping, maybe we can make a small focus group and brainstorm about different ways of helping Palestinians. A lot of the more we shed light on Palestine, there will be less horrors. In the darkness, there will be many horrible things taking place, and we will not know about them now. So our challenge is to make the Palestinian experience and the Palestinian reality known as much as possible. So any contribution in that direction is very welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Jabr. I don't know if the other speakers, Noha, Camilla, Rebecca, Urmi, you would like to share last comment, last few words?
I would just like to thank you, everyone, actually, for sharing this space. I think it's very much needed to have spaces for solidarity. I remember the meeting we met early in July, I think, and we're supposed to meet for only 30 minutes, and the meeting lasted 2 hours. And I remember getting out of the meeting, and I wasn't even tired because I really needed this kind of support and to feel that I'm among people who understand how I feel, to belong. This feeling of belongingness is very, very important. So thank you very, very much, each and every one of you who joined this webinar. The last thing I would like to say is we drafted a statement to be discussed in the coming APA Council happening in mid of August. There's the APA convention. I'm not sure if any of you will be attending, but they have a council meeting, and we wanted them to, like what Urmi said, we want to be this other voice. We want to keep talking. We want to really annoy them. We won't stop talking about the genocide. So we have a statement that I'm not sure if there's a comment box, but I can type an answer. I'm sure. So if you are an APA, if you're an APA member or used to be an APA member in any of the divisions or affiliated in any way, please feel free to write your name in the form. And hopefully we will get somewhere with this statement. So thank you very much, all of you, for all your time and space.
Thank you, Noha. Just to say that I think someone from the ECPA team is putting it in the Q&A chat, which is a bit limited this time because we want to be sure that that was a safe space for us, and as a first conversation of this kind, we took some extra precautions, but just for this reason, for ensure safety.
No, we just really wanted to thank you as Psicologia per la Palestina, and we hope that there can be many more moments of confrontation and struggle for free Palestine and for the liberation of all oppressed population. So thank you so much for this webinar and create such a safe space for everyone.
I also wanted to say thank you and for holding the space and creating the space, and just how important it is to be able to connect with our siblings across the globe and to hear that we're not alone. And yeah, just endlessly amazed and taken aback by the work that's happening. And thank you all for sharing. It's really emotional to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I just echo everyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and Francesca and others at ICPA for putting this together. Thank you.
Thank you really from the ECPA team, for all of you, Samah, Rebecca, Urmi, Noha, Camilla, really for your generosity, for being here with us. And we hope, and I think this goes, this somehow connects to many of the things that were shared. This is just a first conversation. We want to have to maintain this, to have ongoing conversation, even like smaller ones, in any format. We want to make ECPA, to make use of ECPA, the platform to make this happen, and the platform where we can have these important safe spaces where we can discuss these issues and build our strength and solidarity in order for it to be stronger, for us to feel less isolated and alone. So we'll reach out to everyone to share the recording, and also with news about the future conversation that we hope will be a collective effort as this one, because all the speakers were also organizers. So we envisioned this together, and it was also thanks to them, to their strength, that we were able to have this event, this conversation today. And so we will share all this information. Also, if you want, sign up for our newsletter, and we'll try as much as possible to maintain these connections. And thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Jabr, also for connecting from Jerusalem. A lot of strength to you and everyone there. Bye.